I lived in a golden cage, married to a man who was adored by everyone but slowly erasing me behind closed doors. He called me paranoid and emotional, gaslighting me until I barely recognized myself. But one tiny, overlooked clue unraveled a web of lies so vast it led to a massive financial crime investigation. He thought I was just a stay-at-home mom. He never imagined I would be the one to orchestrate his downfall. This is not just a revenge story about a narcissistic husband, it's a story time about betrayal, resilience, and the brutal process of reclaiming your life from the ashes of a lie. This is the story of how I took back my life. If you enjoyed this video or found it helpful, go ahead and give it a like. It really helps me out. And if you haven't already, hit that subscribe button so you don't miss any future videos. Thanks a bunch! You know, the end of my world didn't start with a bang. There was no screaming match, no dramatic discovery of lipstick on a collar. It started with a receipt, a tiny insignificant slip of thermal paper for a $19.99 purchase from a Best Buy 50 miles away, tucked inside the pocket of a suit jacket I was taking to the dry cleaners. The item listed was a prepaid cellular activation kit, a burner phone. My husband Julian didn't need a burner phone. Julian was a pillar of our community in the manicured tech money suburbs of Austin, Texas. He was the charismatic CEO of a disruptive logistics startup. The man who remembered everyone's name at neighborhood barbecues, the husband who brought me flowers for no reason. Our house was a sprawling modern farmhouse with shiplap walls and a quartz waterfall island in the kitchen that was the envy of every woman on the block. From the outside, we weren't just living the American dream. We were the damn poster for it. But inside that house the air was different. It was thin. I had learned to breathe it to survive on it, but I was slowly suffocating. A burner phone? Honey, really? Really? Julian laughed when I showed him the receipt that evening. It was a beautiful, deep laugh that used to make my heart flutter. Now, it just felt like a perfectly calibrated instrument. He took the slip of paper from my trembling fingers and glanced at it, a mask of amused pity settling over his handsome features. This is from 3 weeks ago. I was at that tech summit in Round Rock, remember? The one you said was too boring to come to? It was probably for a giveaway prize for one of the interns. You know how they love their little gadgets. He ran a hand through his perfectly styled hair. Alara, baby, you have got to stop worrying so much. Your anxiety is going to eat you alive. He framed my face with his hands, his thumbs stroking my cheeks. That's why you have me. To handle the stressful stuff. You just focus on you, on the kids, on making this house a home. And just like that, the conversation was over. I was the paranoid, anxious wife, and he was the patient, understanding husband. The gaslight was so bright, so constant, that I'd learned to live in its glare without even realizing I was being blinded. It was a familiar dance. I would notice a crack in the facade, a late-night board meeting that didn't appear on the company calendar, a vague answer about a weekend trip, a hushed phone call he'd take on the patio, and when I'd ask it, he'd look at me with that same blend of concern and disappointment. He'd use words like unstable, emotional, overthinking. He'd remind me how much pressure he was under, how much he sacrificed for our family, and how my insecurities were adding to his burden. Guilt would wash over me, hot and immediate. I'd apologize. I'd feel ashamed for doubting him. After all, I was the one who had given up a promising career in forensic accounting to raise our 2 children, Liam and Maya. I hadn't balanced a corporate ledger in almost a decade. He was the genius, the provider. I was his wife, the mother of his children, an accessory to his brilliant life. I had accepted the terms of this gilded cage so long ago I'd forgotten what freedom felt like. I had learned to be helpless because it was easier than fighting a battle I was always told I was imagining. But that receipt, it stuck with me, a tiny stone in my shoe. It wasn't about an affair. My gut told me it was something else. An affair was too simple, too pedestrian for a man like Julian who curated his life with the precision of a master artist. This felt different, colder. The real turning point came a month later. I'd been feeling a flicker of my old self, a desperate need to have something that was just mine. I found an online certification program for advanced data analysis and financial forensics. It was a continuation of everything I'd loved before Julian. My heart pounded with a forgotten excitement as I filled out the application. I imagined myself feeling sharp again, competent. I mentioned it to him that night over a dinner of cedar plank salmon he'd barely touched. "A course?" He put down his fork, his brow furrowed. "Alara, why on earth would you need that? It's a little strange, isn't it? Going back to school at your age?" "I'm 35, Julian, not 80. I want to do something for myself, to use my brain again." He gave a soft, condescending chuckle. "Honey, your brain is wonderful. You use it every day to manage this incredible home and raise our beautiful children. That's the most important job in the world. Don't cheapen it by pretending you need to go back to playing with spreadsheets." He reached across the table and patted my hand. "Let me handle the numbers. You're not built for that kind of stress. We've built the perfect life. Why would you want to complicate it?" Cognitive dissonance is a funny thing. It's that feeling when you hold two contradictory beliefs at the same time. The first belief was that my husband loved me and wanted what was best for me. The second, which was screaming in my head at that moment, was that he had just called me a glorified, simple-minded housekeeper and told me my only value was as a domestic servant. Both couldn't be true. And for the first time I felt a seismic shift inside me. I was starting to believe the second one. His words didn't just hurt me, they ignited something. A cold, quiet fury. That night, after he fell asleep, the deep, untroubled sleep of a man with no conscience, I went to his office. It was my house too, but that room was his sanctuary, a place I rarely entered. The air smelled of expensive leather and his cologne. My hands were shaking, but my mind was clear. I started with his laptop. It was password protected, of course. But I remembered him once drunkenly boasting that his password was the acquisition date of his first company. A date I had memorized for our anniversary scrapbook years ago. Ironic. I got in. For hours I dug. I wasn't a novice. The muscle memory from my old job came flooding back. I ignored the emails, the documents, the surface-level clutter. I went deep into the system files, the hidden directories, the cloud backups he probably thought were secure. And that's where I found it. It wasn't in a file named Secret Criminal Activity. It was a simple Excel spreadsheet, buried in a folder named Legacy Projects. The file itself was titled Austin Bloom Initiative. It looked like a charity ledger. Donations, grants, community outreach programs. But the numbers were wrong. They were too clean, too perfect. Large, round sums moving between entities with generic, meaningless names. Oak Hill Ventures, Capital Vista Group, Lakeside Holdings. They looked like shell corporations. The kind you use to wash money until it's as clean and white as a communion dress. I started cross-referencing the names. A quick search showed they were all LLCs registered in Delaware, with no public record of their officers. Classic. But then I found a name I recognized, listed as a signatory on a transfer from Lakeside Holdings. Caroline Hale. Julian's sister. Caroline was a saint in our family. A soft-spoken, brilliant CFO at a different tech company. She was always so kind to me, always taking my side in small, meaningless arguments against Julian, making me feel seen. She'd send me thoughtful gifts and text me just to check in. We were supposed to be friends. We were supposed to be sisters. And her name was on a document that looked suspiciously like a money laundering transaction log. I felt the floor drop out from under me. This wasn't just Julian. This was a family business. The warm, loving family that had welcomed me in was a facade. I was an outsider they tolerated. The pretty, docile wife who would never, ever look in the Legacy Projects folder. I kept digging, my fingers flying across the keyboard. I found wire transfers to offshore accounts in the Cayman Islands. I found inflated invoices from non-existent vendors. I found a complex, beautifully constructed web of deceit that was funding our entire life. The house, the cars, the private school for our kids, the trips to Aspen, the image of Julian as a self-made tech messiah. It was all built on a foundation of pure, unadulterated fraud. He wasn't a brilliant CEO. He was a criminal. A very, very good one. I sat there in the dark, the glow of the monitor illuminating my face, and I felt the last vestiges of my learned helplessness burn away, replaced by something terrifying and powerful. He hadn't just lied to me. He had built my entire reality on a lie. He thought I was a doll in his dollhouse, something to be positioned and admired. He thought I was too stupid, too emotional, too domestic to ever figure it out. He had called my old skills a game, my ambitions a waste of time. I closed the laptop, my movements slow and deliberate. A plan began to form in the quiet, cold corners of my mind. A plan that would require every ounce of the intelligence he had tried to snuff out. He thought I wasn't built for stress? He thought I couldn't handle the numbers? I was going to become his worst-case scenario. I was going to use the very skills he disdained to dismantle his empire, piece by fraudulent piece. The game wasn't his anymore, it was mine, and I was going to burn his world to the ground. The next morning, I woke up a different woman. On the outside, I was the same Alara. I made pancakes for Liam and Maya, braided Maya's hair, and kissed Julian goodbye as he left for the office, my lips brushing his cheek with practiced affection. But on the inside, I was a soldier behind enemy lines. Every smile was a strategy. Every I love you was a piece of camouflage. The cognitive dissonance was gone, replaced by a singular, clarifying purpose. I was gathering intelligence for a demolition. My first move was to quietly enroll in that online financial forensics course. Julian's condescending words became my fuel. Every night, while he was out at a networking dinner or asleep beside me, I was mainlining information. I wasn't just refreshing my old skills, I was sharpening them into weapons. I learned about tracking digital currency, piercing the corporate veil, and the exact kind of evidence the SEC and the IRS drool over. My brain, which I'd been told for years was only good for remembering PTA meeting dates and grocery lists, felt like it was coming back to life, crackling with energy. I became a ghost in my own home. I bought a new laptop with cash, a lesson I'd learned from his receipt, and a secure VPN. I worked in the dead of night, creating a mirror of his entire digital life on an encrypted hard drive. It was a slow, painstaking process. I had to be meticulous. One wrong move, one cleared browser history that he noticed, and it would all be over. The fear was a constant companion, a cold knot in my stomach, but it was different from the old anxiety. This was the fear of a hunter, not the hunted. The trauma bond I had with Julian was the hardest part to break. There were moments he would be charming, the man I thought I'd married. He'd bring me a gift, praise my cooking, and for a split second, a treacherous little voice in my head would whisper, "Maybe you're wrong. Maybe you should just stop." It was the Stockholm Syndrome of a decade-long marriage. But then I would go back to the data. The cold, hard proof of his contempt for me, for the law, for everyone. And the voice would fall silent. He wasn't just a cheat, he was a parasite, and he'd been feeding on my life, my potential, my very identity. The involvement of his sister, Caroline, was the cruelest twist. I had to maintain a relationship with her, which was its own special kind of hell. We'd meet for coffee, and she'd squeeze my hand, asking if Julian was treating me right. "He can be a lot, I know," she'd say with a sympathetic smile. "But his heart's in the right place. He adores you and the kids." The gaslighting was a family trait. Listening to her lies while knowing she was the architect of his financial schemes, the one who probably made the whole criminal enterprise run smoothly, was like swallowing glass. She was the one with the real financial acumen. Julian was just the charismatic frontman, the narcissist who needed the applause. As I built my case, I started to subtly implement my exit strategy. This wasn't just about revenge. It was about survival. For me and my children, I started making small, untraceable cash withdrawals, stashing money in a new bank account he knew nothing about. I made copies of all our important documents, the kids' birth certificates, our marriage license, passports. I was packing a go bag, but instead of clothes, it was filled with evidence. The most important step was finding a lawyer. Not just any divorce attorney, but a shark. I found her through a discreet referral from an old college professor. Her name was Anya Sharma, and her firm specialized in high-net-worth divorces with hidden assets and criminal complications. Our first meeting was in a nondescript office building downtown. I brought her the encrypted hard drive. For 2 hours I walked her through the shell companies, the offshore accounts, the fraudulent invoices, the whole intricate web. I spoke calmly and precisely, using the terminology I had relearned. When I finished, Anya leaned back in her chair and just looked at me. There was no pity in her eyes, only a profound, steely respect. "This is not Hale," she said, her voice quiet but firm. "Most people in your position come to me with suspicions and tears. You've come to me with a federal indictment on a silver platter." She leaned forward. "He has no idea, does he? He has no idea who he's married to." "No," I said, a real smile touching my lips for the first time in months. He has no idea. Anya's plan was brilliant in its simplicity and brutality. We wouldn't file for divorce first. That would tip him off, give him time to hide the assets even deeper, to destroy evidence. No, we would let the federal government do the dirty work for us. My revenge wouldn't be a dramatic confrontation. A narcissist like Julian would thrive on that. He'd twist it, turn it back on me, make me the crazy, hysterical wife. My revenge would be silent, systemic, and absolute. It would come from an anonymous source, leaving him no one to blame but the shadows. The day we chose was the day of his company's annual gala. It was the peak of his hubris, a night dedicated to celebrating him. He'd be on stage accepting an award, basking in the adoration of his employees and investors. It was perfect. That morning he was more arrogant than ever. He stood in front of the mirror adjusting his custom-made tuxedo. "You know, Alara," he said, catching my eye in the reflection. "I was thinking about that silly course you wanted to take. It's good to have hobbies, but tonight, you'll see what real success looks like. This is what I've built. For us. I'm so proud of you," I said. And the chilling part was, I meant it. I was proud of the woman who was about to bring him to justice. While he was at the pre-gala reception, I executed the plan. From a public library computer several towns over, I uploaded the meticulously organized files. Everything. The spreadsheets, the wire transfers, the forged documents, a detailed narrative explaining the entire scheme. One copy went to a contact Anya had at the Securities and Exchange Commission. Another went to the IRS's Criminal Investigation Division. And a third, the one I took the most satisfaction in, went to the board of directors of his company and his primary venture capital investors. The email was sent from a secure, anonymous address. The subject line was simple: a closer look at the Austin Bloom initiative. Then I went home, deleted every trace of my work, and got dressed for the gala. I chose a stunning backless red dress. For the first time in years, when I looked in the mirror, I saw me. Not Julian's wife, Alara. I arrived at the hotel just as he was taking the stage. The ballroom was packed. He was in his element, a spotlight shining on his handsome, smiling face. He was holding a glass trophy, telling a funny, self-deprecating story. The crowd was laughing. My phone buzzed in my clutch. It was a text from Anya. "Packages delivered. Clocks are ticking." I watched him, a detached calm settling over me. He started his thank yous. He thanked his team, his investors. Then his eyes found me in the crowd. "And most of all," he said, his voice thick with performative emotion, "I want to thank my beautiful wife, Alara. The rock that holds our family together. I am nothing without her. Honey, I love you." The room erupted in applause. People turned to smile at me. I smiled back, a perfect, serene smile, and raised my champagne flute in a toast to him. In that moment, across the crowded ballroom, our eyes met. He saw a loving, adoring wife. I saw a man whose world was about to be reduced to rubble. It started subtly. A few of the board members near the front were looking down at their phones, their faces going pale. One of them, a man named Henderson, got up and walked briskly out of the room. Then another. Julian faltered for a second, a flicker of confusion in his eyes, but he recovered, wrapping up his speech. As he stepped off the stage, his phone began to buzz incessantly. He ignored it, smiling and shaking hands, but the confident swagger was gone. He looked like an animal that had just caught a scent on the wind that it didn't understand. He made his way over to me, his smile tight. "What the hell is going on? Did you see Henderson leave?" "I'm sure it's nothing," I said, taking a sip of champagne. Then, through the grand entrance of the ballroom, two men in dark, sober suits walked in, followed by several others. They weren't hotel security. They moved with a quiet, unmistakable authority. They spoke to the head of hotel security, who pointed directly at our table. Directly at Julian. They approached him. "Julian Hale?" one of them asked, his voice low and devoid of emotion. Julian's face, for the first time since I'd known him, went completely blank with shock. The narcissistic mask fell away, and for a second, I saw the pathetic, terrified man underneath. "I'm Special Agent Davies with the FBI," the man said, flashing a badge. "We need you to come with us." A collective gasp went through the room. The music died. Everyone was staring. The public adoration he craved had curdled into public humiliation in the space of 30 seconds. This was a fate worse than prison for him. He looked at me, his eyes wide with disbelief and a dawning, horrified suspicion. He opened his mouth to say something, but no words came out. As they escorted him out, leaving a wake of stunned silence, I simply stood my ground, my face a perfect mask of wifely shock and concern. The aftermath was a whirlwind of news reports, lawsuits, and scandal. Julian and Caroline were both charged. His company imploded. Their perfect family was revealed to be a criminal enterprise. Through it all, I was the wronged wife, the innocent victim. Anya handled everything. By the time Julian's assets were frozen, we had already secured a divorce settlement that guaranteed my children and I would be more than taken care of, using the very funds he had tried to hide from the world, and from me. I sold the big house with its hollow, echoing rooms. Today, my kids and I live in a smaller, sunnier house closer to the heart of Austin. It's filled with their laughter, not with secrets. I finished my certification, and then another. I started my own small consultancy firm, specializing in, of all things, forensic accounting for women going through contentious divorces with powerful men. I help them find the money their husbands swear doesn't exist. I help them build their own lifeboats. Sometimes, late at night, I think about Julian. He took a plea bargain and will be in a federal prison for the next 7 years. He tried to claim I set him up, that I was the mastermind, but no one believed him. To them, he was just another arrogant man undone by his own greed, and I was the quiet, unassuming wife he had underestimated. It was the story he had written for me, and in the end, I let him be crushed by it. I don't hate him anymore. Hate is a fire that consumes you, and I have nothing left to burn. What I feel now is a quiet, profound peace. I didn't just escape the gilded cage. I melted it down and forged it into a key. My key to my life. And I will never, ever give it to anyone again.